Okay, hi everyone. We'll just be a minute to let people come in and join us. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to the RTO9 Workforce Development webinar, Unlocking Talent. My name is Erica D'Souza and I'm a project manager for workforce development at RTO9. We're really excited to have everyone here today to share knowledge, insights, and tools on equity, diversity, and inclusion. As we all know, the tourism industry has faced immense challenges with recruitment and retention over the last few years and before the pandemic began. So in response, RTO9 has created a series of webinars like this one to help employers understand how the market is changing and how HR is evolving. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone, we do have the chat and the Q&A. If you have any questions or comments, please enter them. I'll be monitoring anything that comes in, and as we go through the presentation and at the end, we'll have some time to address them. I also just want to note that we'll be sharing an HR toolkit as the webinar series wraps up at the end of March, and this will provide you with a comprehensive takeaway and resources that you can use afterwards. So please take a look at the RTO9 Workforce Development section of our website for that toolkit and other programs and initiatives that will be launched in the coming weeks. Now, joining us today is an amazing advocate and leader for workplace inclusion and diversity. Wissam Ayad is the Workplace Inclusion Charter Supervisor at Keys Job Center in Kingston. She's supported several diverse populations, including BIPOC communities, newcomers, racialized women, and many more. So thank you again for joining us, and let's welcome Wissam.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thanks everyone for making the time to meet with us today and to have this amazing discussion about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how equity, diversity, and inclusion might be a great tool to address the workforce gap that many employers in the hospitality and tourism sector have faced during the COVID era and even slightly before. So thank you so much for meeting with me today and attending that session. So I'm gonna start by saying that we are all here because we want to make some actions. We want to achieve something that's tangible, that would address the gaps that employers in the hospitality sectors have been facing for quite some time right now. So to create change, let's all agree that we need to shift from awareness to action. That's the change in order to be feeling the tangible outcomes. So having that said, our session today will talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion from awareness to action. All right. So having that said, we want to test our awareness. Let's see how aware we are. So are we really aware? Let's see. So, oh, sorry. So EDI awareness. By the way, is it EDI, EDII, DEI? I bet that many of you have heard those different terms and maybe other terms as well and got confused about, which one is the proper one to use. So is it person with disabilities or people with disabilities or disabled people, racialized or visible minorities? So I guess that many of you might be relating to those terms and maybe you have heard them before and you kind of get confused. So are you confused? If you are, it's okay. So we all don't know what we don't know. And I bet that many of the employers that I have worked with would ask that question. Yeah, it is confusing, but is it really okay to ask? We feel like we are walking on eggshells. Like, is it safe to ask? Is it going to be offensive to ask? We don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to hurt anyone. So maybe it's better to stay away from diversity instead of offending anyone. And I know that many genuine desires are behind the lack of diversity. So let's all ask today. And let me tell you something. This is a very safe space that everyone can ask questions. Asking questions is way better than assuming assumptions. Okay, and before that I would move on, I just want to share with all of you that I'm not seeing any of, your good faces, unfortunately, because of the webinar platform, which is totally fine. So I'm not sure, if I'm clear, if there's something, but what I'm sure of is that you can definitely raise your hand if there is anything that you would like to ask on, or if there is any problem with me, like delivering the session, if I'm going too fast. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm not really. Okay, here we go. Okay, so someone's saying that they cannot see the slide. Can see it now. Okay, so I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna actually run the slides from the beginning very quickly. So are you able to see the slides right now? If you can type for me, Erica, please, that would be amazing.
Yes, we can see them now.
Okay, amazing. Sorry about that. So again, we were talking about, creating that change, shifting from awareness to action. And then we started by asking some questions around awareness. Are we really aware? And then I kind of refer to some terms like EDI, EDII, DEI, and people with disabilities versus disabled people, racialized or visible minorities. And I bet that many of us have heard those terms before a lot and got confused which one is the better one to use or the appropriate one to use. And that makes some people feeling uncomfortable to touch on diversity just because they don't want to offend anyone. So the very first question that I get from employers sometimes is it really okay to ask? Like, we don't want to really offend anyone. So today, it's very okay to ask. This is a very safe space. Please take your, your time, type in your, your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A. There will be some interactive exercises that I would really encourage all of you to type in your inputs in the chat box. And I guess that there is also the option of raising hands if there's something that you want to kind of discuss verbally, and Erica would kindly be unmuting you. Okay, so as long as we will be talking about asking questions, and this session is about all the questions that employers, or not all the questions, but many of the questions that employers might have in that regard, let's start by me asking a question. Who am I? Who are you with them? And why are you here? So yeah, I really am very appreciative to Erica that she has introduced me. Thank you so much, Erica, for the professional introduction. However, sometime I would like to introduce myself from a different perspective, from an identity perspective. So I am a woman, an immigrant first generation from the BIPOC community, Muslim, hijabi, and an EDI advocate. And of course, the Workplace Inclusion Charter Supervisor at Keys. I guess that many of you, after reading that, might feel or assume how many struggles and how many exclusion experiences I might have had. And why I'm here because I'm very excited to support all of you in your EDI needs through my personal and my professional experience. Now that I've introduced myself, let's talk about who are our attendees today. Who are the people who attend this session and why they are attending this session? So we are mostly hospitality employers. And what do you want? Of course, excellent service. So your clients will be satisfied. And this service will be delivered or offered to diverse tourists and community. Or maybe you are a talent from diverse background who also would like to achieve excellent service and offer excellent service to diverse tourists and community, all to achieve success and economic growth. So I would invite all of you to take a look on that slide and think about that equation. Everything here is equal except one thing that has a gap: hospitality employers and talent. Though that both of them would like to do the same thing to achieve the same goal. So the question here, why there is a gap? What do we want to do to bridge that gap? How to help each other succeed and achieve good outcomes? How to become more diverse, inclusive, and equitable? Again, let's ask, where to start from? Remember that we have talked about awareness and if we're really aware. So my first question would be, what is diversity in the workplace? Can anyone tell me what is diversity? What do you think diversity is? And again, I'm inviting all of you. Unfortunately, I cannot see you, but I'm hoping to see you through your typing in the chat box or raising your hands to speak and unmute yourself, or maybe asking Erica to unmute yourself. But I would really love and encourage all of you, if possible, to type in the chat box or raise their hands to talk. So what is diversity in your opinion? Specifically in the workplace. Any thoughts? So Erica, I would really appreciate if you can let me know if there are messages in the chat box or someone who raised their hand, because unfortunately I can't see that on my end.
Yeah, so right now we don't have anything in the chat,
Right.
but I am taking a look. Okay, we have something that just came in.
Okay.
People of different backgrounds, ethnicity, experience, skill sets, and abilities.
Great. Yes, that's so right. Any other thoughts?
Okay, diversity in the workplace is having staff who are a reflection of the community. As an employer, to have employees that are representative of clientele.
Exactly. Great. Yes, diversity means the practice of having people from different backgrounds represented in a group or a workplace. Diversity could take the shape of cultural diversity. We could be different in culture, or different in race, or different in religion, or age, or sex, or gender, or sexual orientation, or disability, or socioeconomic backgrounds, or education, or life experiences, personality, gender worldview, opinions, political affiliation. We can be different in every single aspect of life. Diversity doesn't mean only newcomers. Diversity means everything. To have people from different backgrounds, no matter what that background that you're looking at, is considered diversity. So diversity is the representation of as many as possible from those different backgrounds in a specific group. And here we are talking about specific workplace. So important considerations. Those are things that I have ran into with my employer partners in the charter. So when we were talking about diversity, questions came up. One of the questions was, why there are sometimes conflicts in the workplace with diverse teams? Like, yeah, I really am a big fan of diversity and I would like to, and I see that many people are claiming that this is very beneficial. However, I still witness some conflicts because of that diversity. So maybe ask yourself the question in a different way and ask yourself, what type of EDI integrated policies and procedures regulate your workplace environment and practice? What do you do towards that? Is it really the responsibility of the diverse team that you don't put a system and a structure in place that would accommodate many people, that would have a conflict resolution from an EDI perspective, that wouldn't put the standards to respect everyone's dignity and background. So maybe you have a role to play. I am a diverse employer. My team doesn't seem to benefit from diversity. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts about being a diverse employer and really open to diversity, but I don't feel that the benefit that everyone is claiming about innovation and about economic prosperity and about, you know, creativity in the workplace, I'm not witnessing that, though that I am diverse. Any inputs on that? And remember, it's very safe space. You can say what you actually think of, because we need to discuss that together. So any thoughts? And again, Erica, I'm going to ask you to kindly let me know how things are going. Thank you. Have anyone witnessed or heard about that situation before? That there are some diverse teams, but workplaces don't seem to benefit from that diversity. Have you ever witnessed that or seen it or heard about it?
Okay, we have one comment here that says it can be a challenge to implement diversity in a small team of 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, of course. Of course, it is hard, but it is not impossible, because always the diversity should be spoken about from a percentage perspective. So the representation is, if you're a team of 3, you could have 3 different people. So you will be achieving 100% of diversity. If you have a disabled person, an indigenous person, and a Canadian-born person, or like a white Canadian person, that's 100% diversity.
Okay, we have another one. I would want to know what they expected and how they expect to see benefit.
Right. Benefits, that's a great question that we will talk about in details moving forward. So benefits means, if I am an employer and I am hiring and focusing on applying and implementing diversity in my workplace, I should be doing this for a benefit for the workplace and for the people who work in that workplace. That's kind of the mindset, like why I would target diverse population, other than benefiting from those amazing talents as a workplace, but also benefiting those talents. So if I am diverse, so I have opened my applications, I'm very open to have multiple representation from different backgrounds in my workplace. I'm not kind of excluding people from different backgrounds to join my workplace, but though I don't see the outcomes that are more innovative, or the outcomes that I was expecting when I was actually trying to inject those fresh and innovative thoughts in my workplace. That's kind of the question. And to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to tell employers who might have heard about that to ask themselves how this diverse team feels every day coming to work. And that has to do with talking about diversity and inclusion, which many people would actually confuse between them. And they think that diversity means inclusion, or inclusion means diversity. So let's assume that we have diverse employees in my workplace who come from different backgrounds, but they don't seem to be happy. They're not welcome. They cannot bring all of their identities. They don't feel safe to ask questions. They're hiding something because they don't feel that it's okay to disclose that thing. So all of that would definitely contribute to their performance and would be resulting in, a poor performance. That employers would feel that I have a diverse team, but not necessarily having the outcome or the benefits that I was expecting out of that diversity. Which means, or which leads to that second question, or the next question about, is it really enough to be diverse? And that's our very first part of awareness. We have talked about diversity, and that diversity means representation. We have on that big table many people who represent different communities. But is that enough? What do you think? Is it enough to have representation in the workplace? I really would appreciate your inputs on that question.
Okay, we're seeing no, it's not. As an employer, how do I make them feel more included? How do I make sure that the environment supports all different kinds of people?
Exactly. Any other thoughts?
We have, yeah, that's a great point, that diverse staff doesn't mean that those staff feel included. Definitely not enough.
Exactly. Of course not. Actually, and this is kind of a, a hint for employers, that having only diverse people without all the other EDI principles being integrated into the system of the workplace is harmful, not helpful. It's harmful for all parties involved, for the employer and for the employee. And we are going to discuss that more. So now I'm inviting all of you to do that very quick exercise with me. So in a piece of paper, on your laptop, on your phone, whatever you're comfortable with, please take notes of what are your answers on the question that I'm going to ask right now. So can you please, the exercise should be like 10 names. However, I would make it a little bit easier and I would ask you for only 5. Can you please write down 5 names that you really trust in your life, who are not family members? So please write down 5 names of people that you trust, really trust, that are not family members. And I'm gonna give you 5 minutes, and then we'll discuss the second part of the exercise. It's very brand new to have those very quiet moments on a webinar. Like we usually have like calm moments when it's in person session. So we still see each other and feeling that that we are all together. But on the webinars, it's kind of very new experience. Okay, so maybe I will just interrupt and ask if people are ready with the names, because we will be sharing some thoughts. So if people are not ready, can they please do any sign that would give us the sense that they are not ready, like raise their hands or type in the chat that not yet? Or shall we jump into the second part of the exercise?
I'm getting some done signals here.
Great, yay. Okay, so we are gonna jump into the second part. So please, in front of every name of the 5 names that you have written, please check if they are of similar same gender or different gender than yours. Just type yes, no. If they are from the same ethnicity, yes or no. If they have the same native language, yes or no. If they have the same religion or belief, yes or no. If they have the same color, yes or no. If they have the same or similar level of the educational background, yes or no. And I'm gonna give you a minute and then we'll jump into sharing thoughts. Great. Who would like to share their thoughts first? So the question would be, did anyone find that all 5 names are different in those parameters of diversity? So is there anyone in the attendees who have found that they have the 5 names that they trust coming from different gender, ethnicity, native language, religion or belief, color, educational background? Anybody who has their list extremely diverse or 100% diverse?
If you'd like to raise your hand, I can also unmute people.
Yeah, that would be great to hear your voices.
But we do have one comment here. The only difference I had was gender. All other qualities were the same as me.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So anybody who had 4 people different and 1 person similar? Okay, so anybody has, oh, is there any?
Yeah, Louisa has a comment, so I'm just going to unmute her.
Please.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Hi, yes, I had 4 that were different.
Yay, kudos, Louisa.
The only 2 that were the same are the same gender and the same language.
Okay, great. So anybody other than Louisa? Okay, so does anyone have their list including 3 people who are completely different and 2 people who are similar or the same, but 3 different completely? Okay, so anyone who has in their list 2 people who are different and the others are the same? Okay.
Annette has a comment. One second. Yes. Hi, Annette. You can go ahead.
Hi, Annette.
Okay. It looks like Annette needs to unmute. If you can unmute.
that better?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Now I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm so
I
sorry.
had 3 males and 1 Italian.
Right. So again, because I'm not sure of your background and which identity you identify with, so it's hard for me to kind of guess. So I would be asking you the question in a little bit of a general format. So do you have like 2 people that you trust or more, 2 people or more that you trust in your list of names that are completely different than you? From any of those parameters, like all of those parameters, gender, ethnicity, native language, religion, color, and educational background?
No.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much.
We also have Liz with her hand up, so I'll unmute her.
Yep.
So coming from a small community, find that we are mostly white.
Right.
And so when you talk about visual differences, there may not be a lot. At one point, it was an Irish-Scottish division in the town, all white, but still quite pronounced. I find my diversity comes in the backgrounds of the people, what they were, their careers were. And although I may feel uncomfortable melding with someone who is into higher administration, it's something that I've been trying to meld with. And diversity of skills in our workplace, it is important, and trying to make people feel comfortable that their skills can be adapted to some part of our workplace, and then as they become more comfortable, to expand to other skills. So visually, there's not a lot of differentiation, and so it's a change in, it's a diversity of backgrounds.
Right. Yeah, thanks so much for your inputs. And I definitely have some, inputs on what you shared with us in regards to visual differences. So it's not necessarily visual differences that I am kind of asking about. Honestly, of course, there are things that are very obvious and visual, like my hijab. And there are other things that you cannot really know unless you're very close to the person. So you would know. And that kind of my question, because honestly, if these people fall in your circle of trust, it means that you have built that trust over years, which means that you probably know better than others about their background. So you would be in a position that you would be able to say factually, not visually, if they're coming from different backgrounds, either from gender perspective, ethnicity perspective, native language, religion, belief, color, educational background. So the color is obvious. However, many of the others, maybe you are not in a place to know, in fact, what are they and if they are different than yours or not, unless you're really having that very trusted and close relationship with the person, which is kind of the target of the exercise. So if your assumption or your assessment of your list is on visual things, then that would give me a bit of an indication that you might not have that trusted person in your list from different backgrounds. Because if you have, you should have, or you might have had known about, their background differences in terms of ethnicity, native language, religion, educational background, gender, sexual orientation, those kind of things. But thank you so much. That was very rich input that actually can open great discussion. Thank you so much for your input. Okay, so the very last stage, anyone has one person. So far we have Louisa, who has 4 people who are different that she trusts, and 1 person who's similar to her that she trusts as well, but 4 different people. So, and we haven't heard about any other person who's having in their list trusted people from all different backgrounds till the count of 1. So is there anyone from the attendees who have 1 person in their list who's completely different than them and they trust.
We have one comment here that says, I find it interesting because I have a great deal of diversity in my circle of friends. And when you ask us to list those we trust, I mostly chose people I work with.
That's exactly the target of the exercise. Thank you for the input. That's the surprise that I'm trying to kind of show here. So you already got it. Thank you for the input. So anybody has one person in their circle of trust who's completely different than them? Okay. So I guess that, you know, it's been shown the target of the exercise. So that means that mostly you don't trust people who are diverse. You might have them around, as some of the amazing attendees has shared with us. You might have them around. You might think that you trust them. You might think that they are, you know, part of your life. You might think that, you know, they're close to you. But when it comes to the fact, whom you really trust, and you have to do that kind of exercise and reflect, you would find that you don't necessarily trust them as you trust people who are similar to you, which is the very important thing that we were talking about in regards to diversity, and if diversity alone is enough. So as you have mentioned before, diversity is not enough, because inclusion should be there. And inclusion is all about trust. So if you don't trust, but you have diverse, it means that you won't benefit from that diversity. And actually, you might be doing something that's harmful to everyone. So generally speaking, and that doesn't mean that you need to feel any bad. Honestly speaking, and I'm gonna tell you an example that I always give about myself. I asked myself the same question. This is a safe space, right? So I have asked myself the same question once, and I was like, if I'm, you know, going to a party, and this party includes many diverse people from different backgrounds, and you know, I went in there, walked in, I saw, you know, Canadian people, European people, Western people in general, you know, Black communities, Indigenous communities, and some hijabi women. Which group I would be walking to first? And honestly speaking, the first thing that came to mind was the hijabi women. And that's why, because this is where I would feel safe. This is my comfort zone. That's natural. That's our brain telling us what to do, right? What we have been programmed to for the whole of our lives. So that's normal. However, the thing that should be challenged here is not your first reaction, but your reaction towards that reaction. So my second question to myself at the time was like, okay, I'm gonna walk into that group of women and I'm gonna stay there. Am I gonna stay there and stick to them for the whole party? Or I'm gonna be there for like 5-10 minutes till I feel safe, that the environment is okay, nobody is gonna offend me, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm gonna start to mingle and get introduced and chat and having fun. So my answer was, honestly, again, yes, of course I'm gonna mingle. I'm that people person who would go and chat with everyone. So if that's what you were going to do, that's fine. But if you get stuck there with that list forever without trying to trust the other people, that's the problem. So the problem is not in what subconsciously we do at the first impression, but it's how to challenge that subconscious natural reaction. That's how we need to improve. So comfort zone, let's move from the uncomfortable discussion to the enlightening discussion, how we would do that. So that's a visual kind of graph that would show diversity versus inclusion. The diversity is just a representation scattered. You cannot really benefit and see any picture. But inclusion means that you trust and you work very closely, and everything is related to the other, so you complete that puzzle and you form that nice picture. Diversity that lacks genuine inclusion is often called tokenism. An inclusive workplace doesn't just have the representation of people, it has a diversity of people involved, respected, heard, and trusted by the business owners, employers. So if you don't trust them, but you have them, you might need to reconsider that. Because without the trust, there is no inclusion, there is no picture to be formed. Any questions so far, or should we jump into the next slide? Erica, should I jump in?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so now Wissam has talked a lot. She has talked about, diversity, what diversity is, inclusion, trust that inclusion is needed. Okay, we'll be diverse, we'll be inclusive. Is that okay? Like, does that solve the whole problem? Maybe and maybe not. So again, I work with around 50 employers in Kingston. And I always hear questions, which is great. So one of the questions was, why should I offer different accommodations? Why people tend to say, yeah, but you have to accommodate this, you have to accommodate that. Though that I am already an equal employer, I give equal access to everything. Everybody's getting the same exact thing. Why should I offer different accommodations to different people? Any thoughts on that? Is it equity or equality? And what actually the difference is between equity and equality? Any thoughts? Please tell me some thoughts.
I'm monitoring the chat and the questions, so if anyone wants to add in there, or I can unmute as well.
Have you ever heard about those terms, equity, equality? Have you ever asked yourself or someone, what's the difference? Do you have any assumption around what could be the difference? I don't know. I want to ask you, what's the difference between equity and equality? Okay, so I would ask it in a different way. What is equality? Any thoughts on what is equality alone without equity? So you are you are employers, right? How you are considering yourself an equal employer? What do you do to be an equal employer?
Okay, we have one comment here. Equity means that everyone has an equal opportunity to start, but equality takes it a step further and includes everyone in the process and development of ideas.
Thank you so much.
To enable a person, you may have to offer accommodation to allow them to be equal in job performance.
Great, that's a great input. Thank you.
Equality equals already at the same level. And then lastly, we have because everyone faces different barriers and challenges, they can't be just treated the same.
Exactly. Thank you. That's great. And I guess that people gave us some very good answers about the difference between equity and equality already. So I usually tend to give an example of that only for the lack of thinking of a better one. So I'm gonna ask you a question. If you have two cell phones, and then one of those cell phones is like an old model, for example, like those, Motorola, Nokia ones that used to have some antennas. If you remember them or even witnessed them, I'm old, so I did. And then the other one that's like, iPhone, whatever, Pro Max or like an iPhone, right? And then you are trying to put the same SIM card in both phones, in both devices. One that's Nokia, Motorola, old one, and one that's iPhone, for example. Just as an example, like don't quote me on, on that specific example, but do you think that when putting the same exact SIM card, in both phones, that both phones would be working and enabling you to make phone calls, or one would work and one wouldn't? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? If you put the same SIM card in different phones that are of different generations, maybe, or
Okay, we wouldn't get the same result. Another comment, you're equally able to make calls with both.
Okay, so if you try that, you won't be able actually to make phone calls by the two phones that you have. If you put the same SIM card in both phones that come completely from different generations, you're not able. One of them, actually the SIM wouldn't be compatible with the old phone. So those new SIM cards using new technology that goes into the iPhones, they're not compatible to the very old Nokia or Motorola one. So though that you are putting the same exact SIM or the same exact input to the same exact device, sorry, not the same exact device. If you are putting the same exact input to different devices, you cannot achieve the same exact output. So look at people a little bit from that perspective. People are different. You cannot give them the same inputs expecting that they will produce the same output, because they are different. So you need to give them what they need to give you the same output as someone else that you would give them different inputs. So the inputs should be matching with the needs of the person or the individual to produce similar output. Does that make sense? And actually, that's equity versus equality. Employers tend to think that they are equal employed. I'm giving the same exact access to training. I'm giving the same exact access to learning. I'm giving the same exact access to reading the policies and procedures or whatever. It doesn't need to be the same exact. That's equality, and equality doesn't give you equal outputs from different people. However, if you give people the access or the accommodation they need so they can access opportunities, then they are able to produce the output that you are expecting. And thus, you would be an equitable employer who practices equity and not equality. Does that make any sense to you? Any thoughts or questions? Or shall we move on? All right. So having that said, if you have a question like why diverse employer might still face retention challenges, ask yourself if you are an equitable employer, if you are giving similar or not similar, equitable access to your employees so they can go up the rank, having their career growth, be represented in the leadership teams, and thus you would benefit from their innovative ideas, and then you would also including them at that level so they would feel very loyal and you would be addressing your retention problem. So now that we have talked about diversity, which is the representation, we have talked about inclusion, which has a lot to do with trust. And then we have talked about equity, which is accommodation for different people to get access to their full potential. That means that whether it is EDI, which stands for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, DEI, which is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, EDII, which is Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Indigeneity, or any other acronym that you will be hearing about, you need them all. And it doesn't matter if it's EDI, DEI, EDII. At the end of the day, what really matters is to implement all of them: diversity, inclusion, and equity. Or otherwise, employers wouldn't be able to achieve the outcomes that they are hoping for from innovation, productivity, creativity, and retention. Okay, so Sam has talked about a lot of things in regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Oops, sorry. However, why do we need diversity in the first place? Like, oh, that's a lot of things. Like, we need to have diverse population, we have to appeal to them, we have to attract them, we have to offer inclusivity tools, we have to accommodate different people. That's a lot of many things. Why would we do that in the first place? Like, why do we need diversity? Any thoughts on that?
We have one comment, more creativity and innovation.
That's so true. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Without looking into the slide.
Reflects the population.
And why do you need to reflect the population? That's a great input. Why do you need to reflect the population? So people are saying, again, this is a very safe space, right? So people tend to say, oh, organizations need to be reflective of the communities that they serve. Why? Why do they need to? Any thoughts on why do you need to be reflecting the diversity of your community? From an employer's perspective?
Show leadership.
Yes, that's a great reason, of course. But why do you need to show leadership in that specific perspective? Of course, there are multiple reasons. I'm not like questioning you. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it for different thoughts that people might have.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I'm trying to play that role of, criticizing maybe.
There's one here that says the mind that created the problem can't be the same that creates the solution.
Great, that's a great input. I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna give you one input that I have, and please let me know if that echoes with you as employers or not. So when I always talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, I talk about it from different perspectives. And it depends on who are the audience, because at the end of the day, diversity is a very rich topic that has benefits, believe me, to everyone. But it depends on highlighting those benefits to specific groups of people, because people have different needs, right? So we need to talk to the different needs of the different people as well, if we are talking about diversity or advocating for diversity. So for for-profit organizations like many of you, I guess, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, and if you are not for-profit, I'm very happy to discuss that as well. But, assuming that most of the attendees today represent organizations that are for-profit organizations, let's talk from a very economical perspective. Because I guess that talking from a human perspective and from creativity perspective, that you are all very aware of the benefits of diversity from, like you have shared many great thoughts about, creativity, innovation, coming from fresh kind of mindset, different problems, needs different, people to solve them. However, from a very economical business case for for-profit organizations, because leaders in the for-profit organizations, of course, want to secure profit, right? So one of the things is, why do you need to reflect your community? Because your community is your client. Whether that is your community in Kingston, your community in Canada, or your community globally. you are a hospitality and tourism employers. So you serve diverse population everywhere in the world, basically. Come to Canada, or maybe going from Canada elsewhere, or maybe locally through, internal travels. And those people are different. So, and not only that they are different, but they keep on changing. I guess if I would ask you the question about, how do you think Kingston community has changed over the last 5-10 years? Definitely it has changed. I have been here in Kingston for the last 8 years, and I can tell you for sure that the first time that I came in here, I didn't see one single person that looked like me in the street. And now I see a lot, and many other backgrounds. So even our community is changing, and it will keep on changing. So if you are not changing and reflecting this community that you serve, who would be understanding their needs so they can best serve them? Who would speak their language? Who would understand their culture? Who would be? So you would definitely be losing market segments and market share. So if your market share was that big, it would be that big. If you will fall behind diversity, if you don't represent that community and the global community that also is changing. So from a very economical perspective, you still need to reflect the community, because you need to be speaking the same mindset of those people, or at least having those employees who actually speak the same mindset of these clients. So you would keep on maybe gaining and increasing more market segment, larger market share, more for profit. Does that make sense? Or it doesn't? Please raise your hand if it does. Any hands up? Don't tell me it doesn't.
Yes, we have a bunch.
Oh, good. That's a good sign. Thank you. Great. Also, one of the very important things, and you have also mentioned about it, but I'm going a little bit deeper in it. So do you think reputation and market positioning? So, and I'm gonna tell you something that just happened to me yesterday. It's very funny because it just happened yesterday. So I was in Toronto, and I was actually staying in a hotel. I'm not gonna say the name of the hotel, obviously, and I had the worst experience ever in my life in this hotel. Very untrained people, no customer service, though that they are like a big hotel that actually falls under one of the big franchises, like the worldwide franchises. So, and I was really upset of so many things that happened there. And the first thing that I thought of after many trials to kind of let them know that how frustrated that I am and no good response, I was like, the moment I will be out of this hotel, I will post online how bad they are. And what saved them was their general manager at the end stepping in and solving the whole problem. So I told him when I was going out that the only reason that I'm not gonna post that and telling almost everyone about my bad experience so they don't use that hotel again was him. So I guess that it's really, and by the way, he was from a diverse background. And honestly speaking, now we are in that online reviews, social media era that it's very important to keep good reputation. If you don't keep good reputation, if you don't have that representation, if people walked in and they're coming from different perspectives and they feel not respected or not appreciated or not accommodated, they will post online reviews, and many people from very different backgrounds, including dominant groups, will be empathizing with them, and they won't actually using your service. So it's very important to have those employees who understand the culture, could accommodate, could understand, could speak their language, not necessarily to speak the whole language, but even saying hello in their language, so they would feel welcome. So it's really very important to have diverse in this social media era that we live, because it's not anymore that someone would tell someone, it's someone will be telling the world. Okay, And again, you have mentioned, of course, amazing things about, do you think increased productivity and creativity? That was a perfect example about, we need fresh minds to solve problems. Do you think globalization? So have you ever thought that you can open market segment worldwide, like having a partnership with any regional tourism organization outside of Canada and doing like tourist transfers or whatever? What could be better than having people who have connections over there, who speak this language, who understand what could be the obstacles and what could be the solutions for those obstacles? So from a hospitality and tourism perspective, I guess that diversity is one of the greatest tools that could solve, for sure, many problems, specifically in the COVID area. Does that make sense? Should we move on, or any questions or comments or inputs? Green light to move on?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, now with them, you have talked really a lot. So we have talked about equity, diversity, and inclusion, why they are important. Yes, we understand what they are. We understand that we need to work on all three of them. We understand that, from a hospitality perspective, we really might need them. The business case was okay, clear, as far as I understand. Now, what should we do? How we would do that, right? That's the most important piece. So now we are moving from awareness to the actions. So do you think that only awareness is enough? Or should we actually have some tools in place to put that awareness in action? I guess it's obvious that we need to know some tools or have some tools, so we would put awareness into actions. So how am I gonna put what I have learned into actions? The very first thing is that I need to ask myself, where am I right now? Am I diverse? If I am diverse, am I included? Do I trust the people from diverse backgrounds that I actually have the same way that I trust others, or not? Am I equitable or equal employer? So I need to ask myself those questions, so I would know where am I and what could be the gaps, because I might find out that I am diverse but not inclusive, or maybe diverse and inclusive but not equitable. So how do I close that gap? So we have to assess our EDI current profile and our EDI targeted profile. That's number one thing. We are, not all of us, but in general, we are here. Traditional policies, best fit hiring approach, and we want to be there. EDI integrated policies, inclusive hiring practices, and connection to diverse pipelines. Of course, we want to be there, but without the masks, hopefully. Okay. We also, if we are here with that diversity, we want to make sure we are here, so we are one team, one culture, comfort zone. Leaders don't necessarily represent our communities, and we want to be there. Love my job, I'm not exiting. So I have diverse culture, that's a stronger culture, leaders that bring innovative leadership approaches. And diversity is the key. How to recruit talents that represent our community, and how to retain diverse talents. So those are the very important two questions that we are going to discuss now. So one of the things that, before that we would move into the next slide, you are able to see my slides, right? Okay. So traditional policies, and we are going to talk about how to switch from traditional policies into EDI integrated policies. Best fit approach, and how to move from best fit approach into inclusive hiring practice. And I'm going to ask you to just have one look into that picture that I have that has the team of white people. So look at the very four people at the background. Honestly speaking, if I have that team, probably my best fit would be another white person, who's the one at the very front. So it means that thinking of hiring should be switched from best fit, because honestly, best fit in a dominant white group should be another white able-bodied person. But if I think about inclusive hiring practices and connection to diverse people or pipelines, that would actually put me in a different situation. That would enable me to achieve my EDI target profile. All right. So, okay, so now we understand that to move from awareness to action, we need to move from the best fit approach into an inclusive hiring practice. We need to move from traditional policies into EDI integrated policies. How do we do that? Let's have some examples here. So this is an actual example of an actual employer that we have worked with and supported through the charter project. This is the recruitment and selection policies that they used to have. Can you please have a very quick look into the wordings of that policy? And I'm going to tell you how did we switch it into more EDI integrated policy. So it says here, as you might see, the purpose of this policy is to set consistent standards that define the key principles, scopes, roles, and responsibilities that are associated with the recruitment and selection of talent. Any thoughts of that word? What do you understand when you read such a policy? Imagine yourself an employee on your onboarding process, and this is one of the policies that you need to read. And you read that this is the purpose of the recruitment and selection policy. What sense would you get? What would you understand?
We have a comment here, sounds equal, not equitable.
Very true. Thank you. Yay! Anything else? Okay, so it says consistent standards, which shouldn't be always the case. Again, equity versus equality. So it shouldn't be always consistent, or at least it should be something more than consistent. And then it says that define the key principles, scope, role, and responsibilities that are associated with the recruitment and selection of talent. What are those key principles, scope, roles, and responsibilities? Did anyone understand? I honestly read this and I didn't understand a word. Like I didn't get, okay, like this, the purpose of this policy is to define the key principles. What are those key principles? And scope and roles and responsibilities associated to the recruitment and selection of talent. This should be very transparent. How do you select people? It's not sad. It's very vague. So I'm going to tell you how did we switch that into more inclusive policy. So the purpose of this policy is to set a consistent and equitable standards that define the key principles, scopes, roles, and responsibility with the recruitment and selection process, and that supports the organization vision. Just give me a second, please. I'm sorry. Yeah, on expanding and diversifying its qualified talent pool to have people that could meet successfully, so the organization could meet successfully its current and future changing needs. So now when you read that policy, you first of all understand that you need equitable standards, not necessarily consistent. Again, equal is not the way to go. Then what are those principles that actually you put in mind when recruiting and selection people? Things or standards that would help the organization to be supported to expand and diversify its qualified talent pool so they can achieve their changing needs. So now, if I am a new employee, I would be understanding that there is some sort of accommodation that would be offered to me if needed. So I will be set up for success. The second thing is that the whole vision of that company is that they would like to have qualified talent pool that are diverse with that fresh mind, creativity, rich culture, and that this is one of the needs. They understand that the environment is changing and their needs is changing, and they need to kind of be working with that change. That's the message. versus other message that was completely vague about non-transparent criteria that I know nothing about, and equality piece that's not really reflecting any accommodation. Does that make sense? Please give me your inputs or your comments on that change, and if you feel that there is a difference or you don't think that the difference is kind of significant here. It's very important for me to learn from you as well.
Okay, we have one comment here that says it shows where the company vision lies, and it can give employees comfort in knowing what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. Any other inputs, comments, questions?
There's one here. I love that the statement is not static. It implies we are growing.
Sorry, can you please repeat that, Erica?
Yeah, it says, I love that the statement is not static. It implies we are growing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because in the EDI world, nothing is static. Like, we don't know in 10 years how the community would look like, honestly, right? So things need to be changing according to the changes that we witness. Thank you for your input. Great. So let's jump into another example. Okay, this is another actual example of a disability management policy. So the purpose, it was saying here, the organization recognizes and values the contributions that employees make to the organization. The organization promotes a workplace environment where all individuals are treated with respect, dignity, and where all may seek to reach their full potential. The purpose of this policy is to achieve effective disability management and to ensure organization meets the requirements of all applicable legislation, including Ontario Human Rights Code, the WSIA, and Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act. So what do you think of that statement in a disability management policy? Any inputs, or shall I move it? Okay, so one of the very important things that kind of, got me concerned when I read this policy was that underlined piece that says the purpose of this policy is to achieve disability management that ensure that the organization meets its all legislative requirements, which give the impression for disabled people that there is no room for self-identification, that the medical model is the one that's integrated and not the social model of disability. And if you're not very familiar with those concepts, I'm very happy in another occasion to explain more about them, or maybe send some comments about that in an email. And also that it's like checking boxes. They want to make sure that they are meeting all the legislation that actually has to do with disability and accommodation, which, by the way, is something that they need to do anyways. They don't need to make a policy to say so, because they need to. It's the law, right? So it doesn't give any message of inclusivity or equitability or equity. However, they didn't even define disability. So that was the adjustment. So the very first thing is that we have added that paragraph that talks about what disability is. So for the purpose of this policy, the term disability will refer to both mental and physical disability as defined by the Ontario Human Rights Code. And the term barriers will refer to obstacles preventing persons, and most notably persons with disabilities, from fully accessing opportunities and advantages customarily available to others. Barriers may be communicative, physical, technological, systemic, attitudinal. And I really like to focus on this definition of the Ontario Human Rights Code and not the EODA code, because at the end of the day, the EODA is the legislation that everyone needs to follow, no matter what. but the Ontario Human Rights Code. However, the Ontario Human Rights Code is not something that people look in its very details. So here they consider barriers, attitudinal barriers, as barriers that would prevent people of disability or with disabilities to achieve their full potential, which means that even being tough on those people at the workplace, using, like slurs, doing something that's attitudinal, not accepted, is the barrier that prevents accessibility according to the law. So disability needs to be redefined in many organizations about how we see disability. Disabilities doesn't mean people on wheelchair that we would need to make a ramp for. That's only one part, but there are other parts. Many of them are invisible. Okay. The purpose of this policy, so we have added that the purpose of this policy is to achieve an effective and inclusive disability management system that ensures the organizations provides a safe working environment that's free of systemic and social barriers, and also meet the legislative requirements for sure, and support all employees to achieve that potential. Inclusive hiring practice. So this is at the policies level. What could be done at the level of recruitment itself? So adding just one statement to your job posting, i.e. this one that talks about that we are committed to contribute to systemic change in equity, diversity, and inclusion. You can definitely read it. However, I would like to highlight that piece that says that we, in the recruitment process, we want to know more about the collective sum of your experiences, knowledge, innovation, self-expression, and talent that you invest in your work. And why is that? Because this is needed to be part of your rubric assessment when you do recruitment. It's not about some very traditional criteria. If people meet those qualifications, then they are the best fit. But rather, it's more of an open discussion to understand better about the collective sum of experiences and knowledge and innovation and different approaches, not necessarily the approach that we know, but different experiences and different approaches to actually perform well in the workplace. So that needs to be communicated specifically in the job posting, in the job ads, in your social media, in your closing statements in events. It needs to be communicated with people so you would be in a better position to attract people that actually know that usually they are evaluated based on very traditional methods that would definitely or most probably exclude them in many cases. Also, only one very little change, I guess, have already proven to be really good. So one of my employer partners, many actually have implemented this, but one of them have implemented that, and she said after, that was really quick. So after having 2 people from diverse background in their workplace, now they have 12, only because they added this. Internationally trained professionals and or applicants with equivalent international experience are welcome to apply beside the number of years of experience required for that job. And I'm gonna tell you, it's just because, honestly speaking, I am an internationally trained professional, and we have that mindset that most probably because we don't have the Canadian experience, when we try to get our first job, it's gonna be a no because we lack the Canadian experience, though it's illegal to ask, but there is always ways to find out. So, and in many cases, employers are very genuine and they will be accepting and welcoming people from, from international, who have different and international credentials, but they don't necessarily understand or know that people will perceive that they are not appealing to them, that they will exclude them. So that's why I want to kind of highlight that it's not only to review your job posting from any, discriminative words, but also to add some appealing and attractive words that would communicate to your, your potential candidates that you are a welcoming workplace. All right, and Of course, those were kind of, small examples or little examples, few examples of what we can support with through the Workplace Inclusion Charter. And if you need more support with how to tweak your policies and procedures, inclusivity and culture of your organization, looking at equity lens, through any of your practices. So again, policies and procedures, recruitment practices, organization culture, or any other support that you might need in terms of EDI, I guess that we are very happy through the Charter project to welcome you on board alongside 50 other employers. So we can definitely support you moving forward with EDI to attract more diverse population and making sure to retain them as well. So, and this is my contact information if you feel like you might have any question after the session. And for now, I guess that we still have like 10 minutes or 15 minutes for the Q&A. If anybody has any question or inputs or comments before that we go, right, Erica?
Yeah, and I just want to add to RTO9, we are trying to get a target number of businesses in tourism participating in the Charter of Inclusion. So I'm going to put in into the chat the link to the site, and also you have here Wissam's email. So please get in touch with her. We'd love to see that number of participating tourism organizations boosted to show and demonstrate our leadership in the area. Okay, I will just check the questions. Okay, so we have one question here. So what if there's evidence in an interview that the hiring manager's judgment shows the more diverse candidate is not suitable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it has a lot to do with what we call performance biases and confirmation biases. So usually there is that kind of bias. It's a kind of an unconscious bias that sometimes hiring managers from the dominant group would think unconsciously that I have to compromise. Should I compromise quality, to get people who are diverse? Actually, that in itself is a bias, because you're assuming in advance that the diverse people are not performing, or they're not going to be performing well, and you're anticipating that their potential is not going to be as worthwhile as their counterparts from the dominant group. So that's what we call performance bias. And then there is that confirmation bias. So people usually, when they fall into the unconsciously into the performance bias, they look for evidence to confirm their biases. So as a hiring manager who don't think that this unconsciously, that's the unconscious bias, magic, unfortunately, that I feel that this diverse person might not be having the same degree of potential as other white candidates. So I'm gonna start to look at evidence. Yeah, what did he do wrong in the interview? What did he actually miss in the resume? So I'm gonna look into evidence to confirm my bias, rather than challenge my bias and ask the question the other way around. Why do I think so? Is there evidence that would contradict my evaluation? Is there something in their resume? Is there something in their interview? Is there something that they said that's really highlighting some qualities in them that really kind of speaks about their potential, solving problems? Is that instead of asking the question in a way that would challenge the unconscious bias, rather we subconsciously again look for evidences that would confirm our biases. So it's very tricky, and I guess that there are lots of practices that needs to be discussed to combat that unconscious bias. And one of the very important practices is to have a hiring committee and not a hiring manager, and hopefully having a diverse person in your hiring committee. So they would be naturally free of that unconscious bias. And many other things, like an assessment rubric, a rubric assessment, some sort of assessment that would have metrics that are different from the very traditional metrics, and who is putting those metrics, and are they EDI integrated or not? So there are lots of things that we can support you through the charter to kind of integrate to make sure that you are not facing that situation. And at the end of the day, after following all the EDI practices in recruitment that we offer, and many other organizations and like universities and researchers have suggested, of course we're not like reinventing the wheel. It's it's something that's standard. It's like science. So after that, you will be doing all your homework to kind of challenge that unconscious bias. If still the hiring committee with that diversity lens and EDI integrated practices are in place, you still feel that this person is not qualified, then they are not qualified, and that's fine. Nobody says that every single diverse person is a qualified person. There are people like any other people, as not every white Canadian or every white person or every white Western person is qualified. We're all humans. We have good qualities, and some people maybe not really having the qualities of that specific work or job, and that's totally fine. However, the only thing is that we want to make sure that it's not informed by unconscious bias. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was great. I think we have time for one more question and then we'll wrap it up. Or if you have any comments, please raise your hand and we can unmute you as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we have one about the cost. So wouldn't it be costly to implement EDI initiatives rather than using the money for other professional development training?
That's a great question. So here's the thing. So the charter project is free or at no cost for partners. However, it's only for one implementation, which means we are funded to support employers in Kingston to become more diverse, inclusive, and equitable through implementing some EDI measures into their organization. And that through a very comprehensive cycle that I'm very happy to explain to you if you're interested, if you would like to get in contact with me offline. However, because of the capacity and the number of employers who are actually partnering with the charter team, we are not able to do so more than with one implementation or one practice. So for example, if we would be looking into your recruitment practices, that's the only thing that we would be looking at, and we won't be able to give training. If we are giving training, then we are not able to do the hiring practice or the policies and procedures. If we are doing climate survey, we are not able to do something different. You know what I mean? So if you want like something that's extra than one tool, we can always do that as well for some fees, but there is always one tool that's free. So we can always offer that for free, but then we can always do extra depending on what the tool is, by fees, for fees, I mean. Does that answer the question at all?
Yeah, I think it does. And I guess we're at the end here. So I just want to thank you for joining us today and sharing all of that knowledge and action-oriented tools that employers can take here in the tourism industry to support equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I just want to encourage everybody to check out the link that I put into the chat box, or email with Sam directly to discuss the Charter of Inclusion. And then lastly, just keep an eye out on the RTO9 website for our other workplace development and workforce development initiatives that we'll be launching in the coming weeks. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me today. It was really great to be here today, and please feel free to reach out. As Erica has mentioned, it's great to to look at the website. However, I would definitely encourage you, if you have any questions, to reach out directly to me, because the website is under review. so things might change in the in the next few weeks. So please feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. And
Okay.
I'm hoping to see some of you partnering with the charter. So hopefully to see you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
so much
everyone.
for everyone. Thanks RTO9 for such a great session. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.